Yeah, so can I have, I guess, all the speakers up here for the panel? So we have about 20 minutes before the break. So if anyone has any questions for, I guess, anyone, now's your chance.
Thank you very much for all that hard work. I know how hard it is. I have a quick question. So all of you guys talked about how it's important to reuse this data for new projects, new science. But another component that I think that has been missing from the talks at least is the educational component. Do you guys have plans to include tutorials, walkthroughs to the different kinds of analysis, ways to eliminate barriers to entry for young people that are trying to move into these fields?
I'll just jump in. Absolutely. And so it takes a couple of different forms. One is that we run a lot of workshops where we visit universities. We put on a summer workshop, a summer course every year where we are teaching people very directly how to engage with these data. And then creating good, strong documentation. I think we're about to release some tutorials for kind of how to work with our platform and how to work with, say, the metadata tools so that people are able to kind of step in and use it on their own. But that's absolutely a really important piece of it that is a big part of what we do.
Yeah, I want to second. I think that's a really great question, something we've been thinking about a lot. I think actually probably our best educational tools right now for the data on Dandy are Allen Institute educational tools. So we kind of overlap there. But what I've been wanting to create is modules that use open data that any professor could just kind of insert into their computational neuroscience course to teach a concept like PCA, or to teach about what a rate map is, or linear regression. I mean, there's a lot of these fundamental concepts that you could easily demonstrate on data, and in fact, you could use the data that was cited as part of the Nobel Prize, right? And then that's kind of inspiring the student, hopefully, and helps them feel like they could achieve something like that. And if anyone here is interested, I'd love to talk about collaborating with you to create these types of materials.
I'm all about the tutorials and teaching biologists how to interact better with the things that we're building, and also to have a better understanding of the AI tools that exist. So that was a big focus of the workshop that we had, was actually on education. And I just received a little bit of seed funding to pay somebody to help me put together some tutorials that go along with the software that we're building. So yeah, absolutely. This is really forefront for us as well.
So just to follow up on Carlos's question, I have the same question. One way to think about this, I am very familiar with the summer discovery courses at the MBL in Woods Hole. In fact, I was a course director for 6 summers for neural systems and behavior. And having something like what you guys do there would be amazing for a number of reasons, not just for the training and educational aspect, but also to kind of really build these kinds of habits in people where that are just starting out. And if you were interested in that, I'd be happy to chat more about that.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I've been organizing a school called Neurodata Rehack. It's held at Genelia. The 4th year will be this July, and it brings people in for a week to teach them how to access data on the archive, and then helps them form teams to actually do analysis projects. We found that just in that one 5-day stretch, you can get actual figures, and actual hypotheses being tested on open data. And I want to figure out how to expand the reach of this, because there's a lot of hunger for it, and there's a lot of value. Yeah, and yeah, I'd love to collaborate with other summer schools. We've also worked with the African Brain Data Science Academy, and have been in communication with others like NeuroMatch. But yeah, I mean, the more reach, the better. Would love to work with that initiative as well.
Yeah, I also will add that We supported Ashley Juvenet at UC San Diego to create sort of an interactive Jupyter notebook for learning how to use NWB that really targets both instructors and students.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's a great resource as well. Yeah, NWB for EDU, I think it's called.
Yeah, I think that's the website. I can double check that.
Yeah, that's a great resource as well. Yeah.
I have two questions, and they are related. So the first question is, where do you see these platforms for data sharing in 10 years? And related question to this, there are also domains that are supported by government. And you just showed NCBI, right, is one of them. So do you have any productive interaction with government? And are you planning to kind of integrate public domain and government together? So two questions, but they're related. Thank you.
I'll speak to the first one. I think one of the things I would like to see in 10 years. Right now, our data remains, as a community, our data remains largely siloed, right? So our physiology data might go to Dandy, our MRI data goes to Open Neuro, imaging data might go to the BIL, genomic data goes on to NEMO, and they're all in different places, and it's very hard to pull together pieces that are related because they're part of the same project, or are just related because of intrinsic biology. And so I think one of the things that I really hope that we can move towards is a system where, there are different needs for different types of data, but that they're not distributed in a way that like you can't pull them together effectively. So what I want is a platform, and kind of what we're trying to build here is a platform where all of the data lives in the same place and is documented in the same way, even though some of it's in NWB, some of it's in OME, some of it's in X-array, or I forget what the thing is for, and data is the format I'm thinking about for spatial transcriptomics, right? That they're in their specific modality, specific needs, but they coexist in the same ecosystem, and you can interact with them kind of in that same coherent way.
Do you think we as a scientist would have to be pushed by Kavli, by our foundation, by government, or any? So we as a scientist, we actually don't put it kind of we don't store it on the server. But we have actually, this is like a mandatory, okay, if you support it by Kavli, your data is going there. So
do I think you should be pushed, or do I think you need to be pushed? I mean, Ben had that great slide of like the sticks and the carrots, right? I really think that the thing that's holding people back is that they aren't benefiting from the carrots as much as they could be, and partly because the carrots are kind of lagging. And so I think better analysis tools, better systems for working with the data, I think will incentivize people to do this. And I also think that it often is stemmed by the collaboration, right? If you're working on data from your lab by yourself, it might not be that big of a benefit to you to be in this larger ecosystem. But the minute that you're trying to collaborate with somebody, especially somebody who's not sitting right next to you, it really starts to become like an easier way to do that work. So I hope that the carrots will be the thing that draws you in there. But if we need to empower people to come at you with sticks, maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say I want to piggyback on that, but just aside from that last sentence. So I want to say that the three of us, we presented mostly technical solutions to technical problems, and that's half the story, in my opinion, right? So the other half is social, and the two main threads there is, they're number one, that people should be considering reuse of data as opposed to always considering collecting new data. And then number two is people should trust that they will be rewarded for sharing data and curating data properly, in the sense that if other people use that data, then that will reflect well on the data contributor when it comes to career advancement, or when it comes to getting that grant, or whatever professional stage you are at your career, it should progress you in your career. I think we're moving in that direction. I think the problem right now is that it's a bit uncertain to a lot of people whether that's the case, whether really putting that effort in will contribute to an advancement in their career. And so I don't really know how to do this, but I want to push, those types of incentive mechanisms to more and more consider open data to properly incentivize people to do this.
Maybe on that topic, can you speak a little bit to like how you would attribute that contribution? Like, if I go to Wikipedia and there's a clause that if you want to reuse that image, then you have to acknowledge the author or whatever. So how does one get the carrot? And second to that, the second question is like, how do you deal with bad data? I see very different, like probably very trustworthy data, depends, variable.
So I have a couple ideas about, it's, I think that the way, right now the way that if you were to publish a paper using data that I generated, you would cite my data set and it would be a citation and be the same way as if you, and it would be a citation of a paper that I put out about the data set. And it's the same way as if you just cited it because you were like, somebody else did this once and now we're going to do something else, citation. And so nobody knows that that's a different type of citation, right? That it's like, actually you took all of this data and you did this whole thing. And so I think that we should consider something in how that there's like a data tool resource citation that lives differently and looks differently and counts differently than just there was an idea in this paper that's relevant to what I'm doing in my own paper. And I don't know how are there any journal editors here that we can talk to? But like, I think that's something that we have to think about, that it needs to be something more than an acknowledgement, more than a citation that really says, that indicates that this paper exists because of this software or because of this data set, that gives a little bit more credit for that type of work. Yeah, that's one of the things I think could actually help with in that regard.
Okay.
Yeah, I came across a metric recently that was, I think it's called the data index. It's like the H index, but it's based on the number of citations of papers that used your data. So I think there are attempts at creating these types of indices where you could really tout yourself as like a champion of open science and really prove that was the case with data. And I don't know if that's like commonly used in terms of assessing people. I hope so, but yeah.
I need a microphone so I can butt in. No, it's okay. I think I would come back to like some sort of social change is actually needed. There's so much that isn't really going recognized in an academic setting. Like, for example, we have to publish our code, but you don't get like special marks if your code is beautiful and reproducible and somebody can come in and reuse it, or if you just throw some spaghetti onto whatever server you like. So yeah, I mean, I think that these two things kind of go together, where maybe it has to come from also the institution side.
Okay.
Yeah, you may have already sort of addressed this, but I was wondering if there's any planned like quality control for the metadata, because as you said, like sometimes people just throw their data on there and the curation and the annotation is often, well not often, but occasionally kind of half-assed. And then that makes the data not necessarily useful to anyone else. And I was just wondering if there's going to be any minimum standards for metadata, or like how are you planning to ensure that that information is linked to data that's stored there?
I mean, for us, that's how we use our schema, right? We have a lot of validators that you can't upload data to our bucket unless it has, unless this amount of the metadata is complete and complies with the system and complies with the standards. People still sometimes get weird things in there, and one of the things that my team does is kind of look around. We've actually been developing a chatbot, and one of the great things about this chatbot is we find lots of weird things in the metadata, and we have a way that we can kind of verify that this is a mistake, and we can find out what that real information is and go in and fix it. But we try and put as much of that up front as it's being generated and uploaded, so that we can reduce that from happening.
Yeah, I would say on our end, we use a tiered approach. So NWB has metadata requirements and also optional metadata. And then Dandy has additional requirements above what NWB does by default. And then we have a tool called NWB Inspector, which will give you tiered suggestions. Some of them are critical. It's like, we've identified something that's probably incorrect in your data. And then sometimes are best practice violations where it's like, we think this is probably incorrect. And then suggestions, which is like, it would be nice if you added this. And then we prevent upload to Dandy if there's something critical, which, you know, if it turns out there's some weird edge case where that's necessary, they can talk to us and we can help them like actually get it in. But, you know, I think it's hard to create rules when you're dealing with the whole community, because you'll find edge cases and you don't want to enforce rules when they don't apply, because then you end up with a different kind of junk. So, our solution of trying to generate automatic reports based on our best guess of the quality, that's what we've done so far. And then our next step is to use AI to actually try to do things like reproduce the results of papers using open data and see if it's possible, and give data sets a badge if they are able to be rich enough to actually do something like that.
Okay, back there.
So this, I guess, kind of piggybacks on the last question. Just thinking of someone who tries to use a lot of open sequence data, it's like usually useless for not just the meta, but also the data that supposedly is there but isn't there. And so I like that you guys are thinking about this. So this is more of a comment now, I guess. And I think marrying sort of the quality badge with some sort of data H index might be a good mechanism to start shifting the community. I've also noticed that younger scientists versus like very established people seem to be better at sharing their data, and should maybe be the opposite, since the established people have all the money. So if you're in this room and you're not sharing your data, at least for the genomics.
So I'd like to, it seems to me that the weak link in all of this is that at the end of the day, papers get published in journals, and journals have extremely different and variable requirements for how to post data, how to share it, whether it has to be shared, what kind of platform, etc. And I guess I would say, if you guys are serious, you have to sit down and talk to every single journal editor, and you have to confront the fact that there are still predatory, not the bad predatory journals, the elite predatory journals that are still charging $12,000 of, open access fees for publication. And so I think all of this doesn't go anywhere until it's actually interfaced with changing what the journals are asking people to do. Because you're talking about the carrot and stick. The really only stick is what the journal requires you to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. And I mean, when we put out the Brain Observatory data set, and we had a paper, we published a paper about it, and one of the things that I'll mention is that the reviewers never once looked at the data that we shared, and it was about a data resource. And so we got these questions that really indicated to me they've never once actually, or at least one reviewer, I guess I should be fair, one reviewer absolutely didn't look at what we were sharing. And so they'd asked us, well, make sure you share this, and not just that. It's like, well, yeah, but we did, it was there. So journals, some journals require that data be shared, that code be shared, but they're not paying attention to it. They're never evaluating it. I would not ask reviewers to do that evaluation, because there's plenty of things that we're asking reviewers to do already. But I do agree that the journals have to play a much bigger role in incentivizing and rewarding and kind of policing that. And I think that is an important point that is kind of the biggest kind of gate in the process that needs to be addressed.
Okay, we have two more quick questions. So here and then there. Yeah, and you can answer, but there and I think
Is this on?
there.
Yeah. Can I just quickly throw something in that, me working in the Wild West of published stuff, and sometimes you get data that comes along with the paper, and sometimes you don't. I 100% agree that it's the journals that need to do something in order to help shift the culture, because, I mean, yeah, we really are bound by what they're asking of us, but sometimes it's terrible. You have a paper that sounds incredible and has really incredible findings, but you cannot possibly untangle even where the data is coming from or what the numbers are that they're using. So yeah, I fully agree, just to throw that in.
Well, Eve kind of stole my thunder, but I'd actually be a little bit more optimistic. I mean, I think, when you publish in, let's say, an Elsevier journal where they have star methods now, they ask you to deposit all the data in some kind of repository. We could perhaps just expect, or they could perhaps change that slightly and say it has to be in one of these repositories, and for electrophysiological data it has to be Dandy, and for transcriptomic data it has to be UCSC or, whatever it is. And I mean, I just noticed it when, the last time we published in Current Biology, they wanted the RRID for the antibodies, and we were scrambling to find all the different RRIDs, but now we track them in the lab, and so that stick works, So I think, just a few nudges towards the journals would actually probably help quite a bit.
If I can add kind of two things. One is that I agree. Often, though, at the point that you're publishing, if you need to go back and get a lot of that information, it's hard to go back and create it retroactively. And so this is one of the reasons why we're very intentional about getting those records as we generate the data. I think the other thing that I'll just mention, and I don't want this to sound like an advertisement, but this is actually why CodeOcean kind of first started, was to have capsules that go along with published papers, and they live in what's called their open science library, which anybody can go access, and you can find a capsule. You can find you can find one of these capsules for a given paper. It's attached to, it's pointed to directly from the paper, and you get free compute to be able to run this code that has the data from the paper attached to it that creates the analysis for those papers. And very few examples are in neuroscience, right? It's mostly in kind of other domains, but that was why they started. And I would encourage you to kind of explore that open science library, because I think that this is a potential way. And I know I think maybe some of the nature journals have started partnering with them to have that be kind of the preferred method for documenting the data and code that goes with a paper when it's published. But I will reiterate that if you're only doing it at the end of the project, it makes it really, really hard to do it. So.
Perhaps journals need to disseminate this information, so that you're thinking of this ahead of time. Yep. As you're doing the experiments, that you're collecting the metadata.
Okay.
So I think this is all great. Sharing and open access is all great. I wonder if there are any risks to sharing, maybe too much. And I'm thinking of two ways in which this could be misused, like animal activist groups, for example. That would be one example. The other one would be, I don't know, fake scientists claiming that they have collected the data, especially when they have all the metadata, and surprise, surprise, maybe they show vaccines don't work or something, something like that, So to what extent can the data be protected from these kinds of misuse?
I think, I guess I'm maybe optimistic that the openness is the thing that protects it from that. That if somebody is taking data and using it to make a particular claim, that data is open, and so it's easier for us to go in and show what they're doing wrong.
Oh, I think she was saying, what if there was some kind of conspiracy documentary that took data out of context and created some story that, and I've seen stories like this where someone, makes a joke on video, and then it's filmed, and then it's taken as literally true, and so now it looks like something happened that didn't really happen, and it kind of can cause a mess. And obviously people shouldn't be joking, but that's not nearly as bad as what was implied. The one solution is to put things behind permission walls, but really kind of be specific about the types of data that would be appropriate for that, right? Like, so for the actual electrophysiology data, not going to be of animals, not going to be misused. But if you have videos that have sensitive content, this new Ember archive is specifically for behavioral data, including animal behavior, and they have two modes. One of them is literally just a clone of Dandy. So it's fully open, and then the other one follows the DABI model, which was built for human data, and it has a permissions layer. So we're starting to develop solutions to this where they're acknowledging that some data sets, if they are of sensitive content, the problem is you don't want people to use this to allow only their close collaborators to access the data, right? That's the worry. So you really would want to, make sure that this was only used appropriately. But in those types of cases, and I know, we've worked together on data where this was a concern. So, yeah, I think that is totally valid, and I certainly wouldn't want neuroscientists to feel like they're putting themselves at risk by sharing this data.
Okay, so I think this has been a really great session based on all of the interest and questions. I guess in our last 30 seconds, I just wanted to go quickly down the line, and if there was one thing that you could change about how open data is handled in neuroscience that you think would be important, make a difference, what would it be?
Metadata.
Metadata. It's all metadata.
I would want people to really strongly consider reusing data. So if you write a grant and you propose to collect data, justify that in the context of what data has already been collected. And before you collect your own data, just do a search. Just take 30 seconds and do a search on the Dandy archive to see if there maybe is relevant data that could help you and get you to the next stage without having to collect your own data.
Yes to both of those things. I would say just some sort of standardization in the way that things are reported. We're all working on very different things from very different angles, and what we really want is to contribute to a broader understanding of how the world works. So we need to be somehow speaking the same language, but that's probably metadata. And yeah, anyway, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you to all of our panelists. This was great.